Hi guys, and welcome back. Today I'm going to give you a late June update because on my previous video, if you haven't seen that, I'll link it up here, but on my previous video I trimmed my winter clematis as well as my butterfly tree, and I also cleaned out a big portion of my neighbor's yard because of ivy making it through to my yard and above my chicken coop where I was consistently pulling it out. And now that is all taken care of, so I want to give you an update on how that is working out for the top of my chicken coop, and also how it's working out for the rest of my yard and how all those plants are doing. I also want to update you on my tomato plants because they are really looking good and what I have yet to do. So let's get started. We're having a gorgeous sunny day, so hopefully this doesn't take away from my filming. But as you can see, my self-watering container is totally in bloom. You no longer see the container. And if you're not familiar with nasturtiums, once again, every part of that plant is edible. You can throw the flowers into your salad and it is safe to do that. As far as the rest of the garden, this garden area here, I call it my porch garden. And I still need to do some planting here. I still have my liatruses to plant in here. I've got some Russian sage I want to put in here, as well as you can see, that canna lily over there needs to go in there as well. But everything here has gotten big and lush, and it's just looking gorgeous. Now my lilies, I'll bring you up close so you can see. My lilies are all coming into bloom. They are going to be gorgeous. My stargazer here is getting its buds. All the lilies that I planted back there, I thought they were going to get much taller. And maybe next year they will, but I will be taking maybe 3 of them out, placing them in another part of the garden. But as you can see, my red hot poker is starting to get its blooms. I thought it was yellow, well, at least it was yellow last year, but looking at the tips, it looks like it may go ahead and turn into maybe a variegated yellow with red. We'll update you next month. But my liatruses are all going to start blooming. Those I need to get into the ground. My stone crop over here, as you can see, is now in bloom. My hop-like oregano, which I thought I had pulled this out, and I guess I had left some of it, but that's a good thing because it's beautiful. But as you can see, it's getting some of its little tips, and it's going to flower. On this side of the garden, which is across from my porch garden, I refer to this garden spot as my driveway garden spot because it's right next to my driveway. Now this, for the most part, as you can see, is doing really well with the exception of one thing, and that is my Delphine Eldora. Now I had some suggestions to trim it back, and therefore I did, but to be honest with you, I think it's gone. I will continue to try to nurse it and see what happens, but I think she's had her lifespan and it is what it is. But this was one of my biggest mistakes. Now I understand that you do not move Delphine Eldoras, especially in zone 8B, because we get a lot of rain. And this year we got record high rainfall. And when I moved it, it continued to rain, and Delphine Eldoras do not like to have their feet wet. So that might have been the reason, or it could simply be because Delphine Eldoras don't really live past 9 to 10 years, and this one has been in this yard probably about that amount of time. So you know, it was a big mistake, a big disaster this year, but it is what it is. However, with that said, it has given me the opportunity to plant more here. The good news is that everything else here is doing fantastic. My lilies are going to be blooming soon. The other thing that I did is that I pinned up my clematis, which is called the President, and it is doing fantastic. It's growing up that trellis just as I had planned many years ago. On this side of the garden, I call this my front corner garden, and this area here is doing really great. I did trim my lamium over on both sides. I added a new container. I did like that other one, but it was pretty big. But I kind of like the smaller one. I like that it has texture in it. And it just looks much better. Not so giant. Gives me opportunities to also plant here. But during the day, this area here gets a lot of sun, because when the sun is moving to over here to the south and then to the west, this whole area here gets a lot of sunlight. It's good, it's fine, but this little fern here tends to get more sun than it really requires. So I may have to move that one. But otherwise, everything here is doing really great. My oak leaf hydrangea, as you can see, is doing much better. I initially looked at this on my last garden update, and I noticed that the stems are very baresome on this, but let me tell you, it is getting some leaves. As you can see, and I'm not sure how well this is going to present it, but there's a lot of new foliage coming out through all these nodes over here, as well as even that one there. So all this whole bare stems, they're all going to get foliage, and it's going to fill in. So there's not an issue with that. But look at the flowers coming in. This is called the ruby slipper, and it's supposed to be quite fragrant, so we'll see how that works out. Over here, I cleaned out this corner. I took one limb off of this Cherokee Brave. Every branch on it has some bare stems, and then it just kind of is top heavy. So I tied it together with some jute lattice that I had, as you can see right there. But I really need to pull this out towards and then tie it to that post over there. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a post over in that corner, and I need to actually tie it over there somehow where it's not so obvious. Hopefully it gets stronger as it gets older. But I have a rainbow fizz spirea over here that is coming into bloom. Rainbow fizz spireas, they can accept the shade, they can accept sunlight, and they do well either way. This one here is really pretty. It's got kind of a red color, kind of a, I don't know, fuchsia color flower, and I really like it. But right there, it's just way too crowded. So I'm gonna pull it out, maybe place something else in its place in that corner where it just doesn't look so crowded. Maybe some flowers or something. But otherwise, everything's doing great. My oak leaf hydrangea here, again, these are one of my favorite hydrangeas, simply because it just has beautiful foliage and they turn colors, and it's just really great. What's really beautiful about this flower is that, look, it has this really chartreuse centerpiece. This is called a snowflake, and these will get about 6 to 7 inches in length. It is completely filled with blooms this year. It's doing fantastic. In this container, this is called a rose champion. I call them pinkies, but I did not create this container. It actually decided to seed itself in there and create itself. I have a love-hate relationship with this plant because although it's a very beautiful flower, as you can see, it just has to be deadheaded all the time. And although it's drought tolerant, it's a little bit high maintenance for me. But since I decided to make its home in this container over here, I will go ahead and accept it for what it is. Above it is my magic blanket rose bush. This is a climber. It's been in this yard for over 25 years. Came with the house, and I am trimming it consistently, and it is a profuse bloomer. I love it. It's beautiful. It makes a big statement in my yard, and there's just not enough good things to say about it. I don't know that they even sell this plant anymore because I cannot locate it on Google. Over here, my English lavender is going to start blooming. All of my coneflowers are now starting to come up. My spiderwort is doing great. My heucheras over here, which are Dream Lucid heucheras, these get a tremendous amount of sun, but they managed to survive. Last year they got some damage because of having 115 degrees, but hopefully we don't get that type of weather. But as you can see, it's getting full-blown sun on it, and it does good. So I'm happy about those, and they've gotten so much bigger too. So everything here is doing great, growing tremendously, you guys. Everything here has gotten big, and it's amazing. If you go back to my previous early winter update, this was all bare pretty much. And look, in the end of June, this is how big and lush my garden gets. My hardy fuchsia over here is starting to get all of its buds. It's my favorite old-time hardy fuchsias. This is not an invasive fuchsia. It stays intact as a shrub, and I just love it. It does get taller and wider through the season, but it's very manageable. I've got some flower buds on my Dasul dahlias here. Now, what's interesting is that this Dasul and that Dasul both came up at the same time. And this one over here, for some reason, is much taller and got flower buds, where that one does not. I don't know what to say about that. But look at my Rosa Sharon. It is going to survive, you guys. It has got a lot of blooms this year, and it's got a ton of buds coming up. But look at that flower. And yeah, I ended up cutting the 2 large stalks, or 2 or 3 stalks that were up there. I think it was last month, and look at it. Just doing great. I have been babying it. I have been giving it some plant food, and just really consistently watering it, because the eave up here does not allow that to get wet, so I do have to manually water it. My rockin' salvia is coming back. It's doing great. Heuchera's doing fantastic. Yarrows are in bloom. My Transcentia Purple Heart is now getting big and gorgeous. I don't see any buds yet coming up on this lilies. These ones are a different species, and I just love, I don't know that you can even see this on film, but right here you might capture some hues of blue. This plant has a lot of blue in its foliage, and I really love it for that reason. My Japanese grass is doing fine. Coming up over here, in between over here, I don't think it's doing as well. It's coming up. My Bishop Dahlia is doing fantastic. My Phobia repaired itself from when I really cut it back severely this spring. My Golden Gate Ephobia, this one is a dwarf ephobia. This one will only get about 1.5 feet. I don't think it gets it much taller than that. And I just absolutely love the contrast in color, and that it has some pink in it. Boulevard clematis, which came out this year. This one gets about 3 feet tall and wide, and it's just doing really great. But as you can see right through, and now I don't have to contend with any phobia coming into my yard, but rather getting quite a bit of sun for my butterfly bush here. And it is getting all of its blooms, as you can see. And this is a gorgeous butterfly shrub. Let's see, I have a Liberty hosta right here that's going to start blooming. It's got 3 blooms on it. Love this plant. One of my favorite hostas. This is a hop-like oregano plant here. Not my favorite one, so I'd probably be planting something else in its place. I have a forever red heuchera right here. Some helleborus right over here, doing great. Spot on, that are also doing great. This hosta here, I'm not 100% sure of the type of hosta that is. If you guys can help me identify it, that'd be great. I've had it for several years. The snails have chomped on it and tore it to threads over the past few years, but decided to leave it alone this year, which has been fantastic. This is a Perennial hydrangea. I planted it here last year, and this will become a vigorous grower probably in the next year or 2. And then it will add a nice privacy fence for me over in this area. I have a Jack Frost here. Can't say enough good things about Jack Frost. Absolutely love them. This is a Shiner Rose. I don't know that they even sell these. These are an abundance here in the Portland Northwest area. And it seems to be doing fine. I have a Minute Maid hosta here that's growing much bigger. Over on this side, I have another Jack Frost. This hydrangea, I'm not sure of the name of it. I've had it for quite a few years. It was something I transplanted from the backyard because it was getting too much sun. But this one here is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of my favorite. I love the color. I love that it has this little bit of white rim around it. If you guys know what type of hosta this is, please let me know in the comments below. Would love to know what that is. I did have a rhododendron right here that I finally took out because it died, so I will be planting something here. Jupiter's Beard valerian root is a beautiful flower, blooms consistently throughout the season, and it is something that I do deadhead quite often throughout the season. In fact, I just deadheaded it and it's coming up with the second bloom. Doing great. Right here I have some grape hyacinths that grow every spring. I did incorporate a burgundy, and I don't know how to enunciate the word, so I'm going to just put it down on the screen for you. But since I incorporated this new plant in there, once the grape hyacinth dies down, the foliage of the hyacinth continues to stay green, and this just gives it a really nice top. So I'm really glad that I did that. Let's see, I have a fern here, some more Jack Frost here. I have some astilbes here, some first blush hostas right here that I planted, I think going on the 3rd season, but I can't remember. And they're doing fantastic. I love first blush because these will eventually turn kind of reddish, and the foliage on them are red, and they're supposed to be really great, beautiful hostas, and it'll just be a great addition to this dark shade garden that I have going on over here. Now you can see how much damper light I'm getting in this shade garden. This could be considered a shade garden, it could be considered even a dry shade garden because it does get ample light. It gets beautiful lighting now, especially because if you've seen my previous video where I trimmed my butterfly tree, I now get just enough light throughout here to give this area some well-needed ample light. Now, because it's getting ample light, it may not be considered a deep, dry shade garden, but nevertheless, it can be considered that. Whatever the case is, it's doing beautiful. I'm happy with the outcome. And now this area will get more light as the sun goes down behind me to the west, but it's short-lived, and this just looks amazing. It's kind of like my little secret garden. Again, I have some valerian root here. This one, I'm not 100% sure of what the name of this is, but I'm going to call it an afterglow because when I compare it to the afterglow, that's exactly kind of what it looks like. I have a whirlwind hosta right here. In this side, I have an Eden hosta. It could very well be an angel wing hosta, but I'm not 100% sure. I've had these three in this yard for quite a few years. I would say nearly 10 years. So they're at their mature height and size. This one here is a guacamole. I have some more astilbes here that I planted last year, and when I first planted them, they did not get the proper lighting, and therefore they kind of more or less died on me, but they apparently wanted to come back, so they did both come back. They're coming back up even stronger. In this container, I have some lamium, some forever red heuchera. This is a Golden Gate fuchsia. I love the red stems. Now, I actually had this fuchsia in this container over here, and I replaced it with this Golden Gate just because of the chartreuse color of it. Thought it would be a nice contrast from all the darker greens. And I placed my hardy fuchsia over here, and initially it went dormant and went into shock, whimpered, but it came back and it's nice and strong. So I'm really happy to hear about that. Now this container is one that I created as a self-watering. I can't, because I trimmed this butterfly tree and cut down a lot of these branches, it kind of sandwiched this a little bit. I need to move this, but typically once it gets a certain amount of water, it'll just come out from this pipe and doesn't oversaturate that fuchsia. I have some Emporium cherry tart that I need to plant here. It's getting some new foliage on it. Pretty exciting. I have some more spot on over here. Have another Eden or Angel's Wing hosta here, which is getting some buds on it. Lady's fern, and I have some Lysine kit, Persian chocolate ground cover here. It's not aggressive, but it is a very beautiful ground cover because it has this beautiful yellow flowers that are going to be starting to bloom here soon. And this can take really deep shade, so it does fantastic even with ample light. Let's see, I have a brim cup hosta here. Over there, I have a maidenhair fern that I had transplanted from this side of the garden, and it did not fare well. It actually went dormant on me. Thought I killed it, but there it is. It's come back and it's doing great. Since I trimmed this butterfly tree that was probably once a shrub, This is now getting a lot of photosynthesis to make it beautiful. Picked it up from the ground. It is a little bit shaded here right now, but this plant here was actually around the corner, and I transferred it and transplanted it here, probably 10 years ago, and it does perfect under the shade condition as well as with damp light. I just absolutely love Rainbow Fizz spireas for that reason. And it is also in full bloom this year because it is getting the appropriate amount of sun. I will talk about and point out this Dracula plant here in a minute, but let me just go over on this side. I have some sedums here. It looks like it's in deep shade, but it actually gets good morning sun, so it's doing fantastic. Like sedums because they don't like to be tampered with. They don't care if they're watered. They don't care what type of soil they're in. They're very forgiving plants, something I would have in any garden. Need to plant more of those. I have what I'm going to call another afterglow because I'm going to assume that's what that is. I've had this also here for about 10 years. This is my winter clematis. I am continuing to take care of it because it is fighting some corrosives, but this is no longer climbing up the wall. So catch that video, and it is doing really great. Have some lamium here, another fern here, some bleeding heart in this container, which by this time it's usually died because of the amount of light that I get, but this year it's sticking around. It's actually even producing more bleeding hearts, and I really love that plant, but once it goes dormant and goes away, this pot right here that it resides in and has resided in the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, just becomes a plain container. So I do see that I'm getting some more valerian root in here, so I'm going to see what happens with that. In this really small container, I have a hardy fuchsia. This one here has been also in this pot for about 5 to 6 years. Comes back every year and does really well. This year it's gotten a lot fuller and looking beautiful, so I'm really happy. I'm going to move around because this isn't showing very well, but this right here is a flowering maple or a Japanese maple, whichever way you want to call it. This, I put it in my small pergola over the winter months to see what would happen. And what happened was it simply grew, continued to bloom, never went dormant on me. Where in the past, I've always kept it in this area, and because of the eave up above, it has protected it, but nevertheless, I've always had to trim it in the springtime. And this year, I just brought it out, brought it back into its perspective place, and it is exactly the way it was when I pulled it out from this area for the winter. Right here, I have another valerian root. This one suffered a little bit because of the amount of rain that we got and because it just happens to be where the gutter is. So I was getting a little too saturated with water, but as you can see, it's doing fine and it will survive. So that is a nice thing about valerian root that I really like. And I just deadheaded it, so it's coming up with its second set of blooms. So now let me talk about the Dracula plant and open that gate to get more light, and also show you the backyard, my tomato plants, and then close it out. So now let's talk about this Dracula. And all of a sudden the sunlight decided to pop up. But This is actually a really beautiful plant. It's called a macaroon flower as well as a Dracula. So if you may be familiar with one of those terms, but the flower itself is beautiful, as you can see. However, this smells like a dead animal. I noticed that when the flower starts dying down, that it doesn't smell. But initially when it opens up, it really has a heck of a stink, especially when the wind is blowing. And I notice that I have another huge flower here. And let me take you around the corner and see how this is dying off now. And I actually didn't even realize that this one back here was even in existence until just a few minutes ago. But that is pretty big, and this is much bigger than this was. I'm not gonna put my nose into the pot, but maybe I can bring it way in there so you can see what it looks like inside. So I don't know if it's this tongue that smells or if it's in there, and I'm not 100% sure why it smells that way. I'm assuming that it's because flies will go in there because of the smell and then they die, and it just emphasizes that smell. I wouldn't recommend it to be right next to your house, but I also noticed that as this part starts dying off, it doesn't smell anymore. And this plant, interesting enough, it doesn't require a whole lot of watering. Probably would come up even if I didn't water this area, but it doesn't get any direct rain on it, but I do water it and it seems to survive. My Tanga, and I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, so I'll put the tag here. That is doing fantastic. Has more blooms than it ever has in the whole time that I've owned this plant, which has been now going on its third season. The star jasmine is going to start blooming. I intertwined them because I thought that the star jasmine flowers would just add to this. So they don't seem to be competing with each other as far as roots. This is going to be probably quite sunny, but the star jasmine that I have on this trellises here for screening off the neighbor, that will also start blooming here soon. Here is my other Tanga, and it's got a ton of blooms. And this one here can handle the shade as well as the sun. My Lithodoria on that side. I've got some basil over here. In this container, I have pinnacle hydrangeas starting. I will talk about those in a different video. See how well they are making it. As you can see, I still have not taken my canvas walls out, and it's mainly because it has been raining so much. But my rock rose is beautiful, blooms consistently throughout the summer. Let me bring you over to my tomato plants, and as you can see, they are getting ample light. So this was a perfect spot for it. Now I haven't planted in these two containers, and as you can see, I still have a lot of garden things that I need to start planting. I don't know if it's too late to do that. I may still do it or start over next spring. But look at my tomato plants. Starting to get their flowers for fruit. Just doing fantastic. Everything in there, including the marigolds. And this one here, same thing. This one here is called a chocolate cherry tomato, and look at how big and beautiful that is. They're both indeterminate tomatoes, so they will live all the way into fall until the frost kills them. And this one here is a maklavash, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. So back here, my California lilac is doing fantastic. My black lace elderberry is doing fantastic. It's getting big and tall. My kudos ambrosia is doing great. My pot of gold is gotten bigger. going to start blooming. All of my coneflowers are now starting to get all their flower buds, as you can see. And oh, this is just going to look gorgeous this year. My Chihuly rose bush, look at how gorgeous this is. Now this is the second set of blooms that it's gotten, and now you can see all the colors that it has. It goes from yellow to creamy whites to an array of mixed pink to blush and yellow, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful rose bush, and it is doing fantastic. Thought I'd trim it to get it to be more of a round circle, but it's being stubborn and it doesn't want to do that. So I don't know, maybe you guys can help me out, give me some suggestions, but I clipped it way down and it's still coming up the way it is. So I'm just gonna continue to leave it alone. My hot lips salvia is now gotten big, and that will get a little bit taller and probably a little wider. I do trim this back a little bit during the summer months because it can get fairly large. I do have my lily here that looked awful, really awful. I thought it was completely dead from the winter months, but looks like I'm getting my flowers. Look at that. Here's my flowers. And so that's doing great. Let's see, over here, this is my other shade garden, dry garden if you want to call it that, but everything here is doing really great. My St. John's wort is going to be blooming. My Japanese grass is doing, it's Hanakola, and I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right. Anyway, whatever the case is, it's doing great. Every hosta is doing fantastic. I did end up moving one hosta. Actually, I had two. I had one, a couple of them that were entwined together right there. These ones were closer to where my finger is by the clematis, and I dug it out and placed it further. That's why it's still in the cage, because I don't want the chickens to dig around it. And it's doing great. It's doing really, really good. New plant from my neighbor's yard, which is great, but as you can see, it's nice and clear. You can see through, and it's looking really clean, looking at it from my side. And of course, I've got my Alyssa Splath that is in bloom, the blue one right here, which is this one right here, trailing all the way up and back down. And then I have my Nellie Moser still in white. As far as hostas, I have a June hosta here. I have a blue ivory over here. I have a variegata, a Mara variegata hosta right here. I don't know what that hosta is. It looks like it might be another blue angel, but I'm not sure because it just came in a package deal. But look at the pirate. Look at how beautiful that white is at the end. And this one here will get, I think, about 24 inches in diameter. My Island Breeze, that is going to be gorgeous. It's going to fill in this whole spot. I'm going to get about 24 inches wide. This over here, this Komodo dragon, will get purplish in color. That one's going to be huge. My Angel's Wing is going to get huge as well. It'll fill in all that spot right there. It's going to look gorgeous. And then, of course, right here is my Hudson Bay. But look at how beautiful that. Look at that. It's just like a work of art. Looking really great. Now, I haven't had a lot of snail issues over here, but then I have a lot of good amended soil here that has a lot of wood in it. So snails don't really like to get scratched. So for that reason, they kind of stay away from here. All of my heucheras are doing really, really great. This is a broomstruck hydrangea, and this is blooming profusely this year. Last year it didn't do very well, but we were getting really high record heat. But it is fighting some corrosives, as you can see on the leaves. and it's also dealing with iron deficiency, so I am going to be treating that here soon. But it's got a ton of blooms. Now, broomstruck hydrangeas grows in new wood as well as old wood, and so because of that, you really don't necessarily need to trim these. I trim them. I trim it every year, but that's mainly because I just want it to look good. But I like the red stems in this, and I don't know how well you can see that on film, but look at how beautiful that red stem is. That's what I really like about broomstrucks. But broomstrucks, endless summer, all these type of hydrangeas, they're not one of my most favorite hydrangeas because they are very susceptible to diseases and corrosives and a bunch of other things. I'm surprised that this has been in this yard for several years and hasn't completely died. Now let me take you on top of my chicken coop. And it is looking fantastic. My Roma tomato is doing great. My leeks on both sides are doing great. My cilantro is getting big. And my strawberry, well, the birds are eating it, but I do have a strawberry. But everything else seems to be growing beautifully. Now that I cleared that big chunk of foliage in the neighbor's yard, now you can see that there is no obstruction here, and I'm so happy with it. And if you can see real close, you can see all the flowers up there now. All of the creeping thyme in this side are now starting to cascade over. And looking at the chicken coop from this angle, now you can see all the way through, and the chickens are going to get some light. Breakfast. Yay! Anyway, you guys, that's gonna do it for us. The ladies and I, thank you for joining us today. And you guys, don't forget to get up, get out, get active. And we will see you when we see you in our next video. Love you. Bye-bye for now.